Hey everyone. We are happy to have Jules Gimbrone here with us tonight and in the studios for a few days. I met Jules in 2013 when they were studying at CalArts for their MFA in 2014. I've wanted them back to have them back for their brilliance and generous spirit. They also hold an MA and BA in sociology and studio art from Smith's College. Jules Gimbrone is a sonic visual artist and composer, writer, curator, and educator. The title of their lecture is Transcensing, a rubric they developed, and I quote them, "Transcensing modalities are methods that trans people, specifically those who identify as transgender, but also people whose subjectivity is unmoored or unrecognizable to the dominant culture, intuitively cultivate to navigate the world." Jules has appeared internationally in art venues including museums such as Hammer Museum, in collaboration with Mika Silver in 2022, Walker Art Center Resonance, a sound art marathon in 2019, Sculpture Center in New York, not the other one, Another Echo in Practice in 2018, the PS1, the Rubin Museum in New York City in 2017, Socrates Sculpture Park. Selected exhibitions and performances include MIT List, Bartolome Gallery, New York. I'm sorry, I didn't bring my, sorry about that, everybody. Klaus von Niexhagen Gallery, whose director Ingrid Bromberg Kennedy is lecturing in print media tomorrow. I forgot to tell you that. Issue Project Room, Field Recording Commission, Pioneer Works, Los Angeles Contemporary Exhibitions, Human Resources LA, LAX Arts, Stellar Projects, Bodega Gallery, Helena Unrather, and Melanie Flood Projects in Portland, among many others. Music venues include Red Cat, Issue Project Room, Spectrum, and the Theatre de Lucien in Geneva, Switzerland. Awards include Fellowship at Civitella Ranieri, at the Umbertide, Italy, 2023. Remhort Mann Prize from New York City, 2018. Sculpture Center in Practice, Participating Artists, 2018. Foundation for Contemporary Arts Emerging Grants, 2017. Issue Project, the Emerging Artists Commission, Brooklyn, New York, 2012. Brooklyn Artists Council, DCA, re-grant recipient, 2010. There's several more. I'm gonna skip down. Curation's Ear Wave event, 2021. Everybody come stand at the altar, PSSST, Los Angeles, 2016. N, and then bracketed enter, and then S, Strategies, Native Strategies, Los Angeles Contemporary Exhibitions, or LACE, 2014, and Fault Lines, PAC Projects, Human Resources, Los Angeles, 2013. Publications as an author include guest editor for speculative scores outside of standard time, Earwave event 2021. Touching a Third Sound, Transcensing in the World of Deep Fakes, Fourth Wall, Artist Op-Ed, Walker Art Center, and a Room Without Walls, Experimental Music and Queer Space, Earwave event 2017. The Privileging and Negotiating of Bodies of Sound, Native Strategies, Music Issues, 2016. Please help me to welcome Jules Gimbrone. You're not worried about it?
That's fine.
Okay. I don't think I got it contaminated.
Okay, you're good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rebecca. It's really fun to see you and to be here. I'm going to begin. I'm writing an essay on transsensing that's going to be published in a sound art journal called Resonance, coming out of UCLA Press soon. So I'm going to read from the introduction to that while I just play this video. It's just kind of like a primer. And so in this video, let's make sure that the volume, hold on. So I have it's kind of just like a little tool to understand my work a little bit. So I'm using a microphone. There's a transducer on this vessel that is filled with like detritus and water. This is like from 2017 in my studio, and I'm just putting the microphone around the vessel and creating feedback and resonance, and so kind of letting this dynamic input-output, this feedback loop play. So I'm going to read a little bit from Transsensing. To inhabit this realm, this churn of flashing screens, endless streams of data, the algorithmic pulse of our devices, is to encounter a peculiar kind of wilderness. It is a landscape where truths are blurred by deep fakes, trust erodes in the face of misinformation, and connection dissolves into the stark ache of alienation. Despite the ceaseless hum of being connected, the pervasive quiet of loneliness persists. The media we consume, the cultural biases that shape perception, these are the forces that contour how we access ourselves, each other, and the non-human presences that make up this world. As post-human intelligence emerge, the mechanisms of sensing seem less like tools of understanding and more like mirrors, reflecting the biases that birth them. And so the questions become urgent. How do we, quote unquote, make sense? How do we discern meaning in this boundless tide of information? To sense is to turn towards knowing, not the knowing of the intellect, sharp and reason, but the knowing of the body, deep and murmuring. It is to touch the world in ways that precede language, to lean into an embodied intuition that resists the fixity of explanation. Sensing, in its simplest conception, begins with the five senses: sight, touch, smell, taste, and hearing. But this classical framing is in itself a narrowing. Contemporary thought, from neuroscience to philosophy, opens the senses into broader, more fluid terrains. Thermoception, heat, nociception, pain, equilibrioception, balance, and proprioception, body awareness, join this repertoire. And beyond them lie a still more dynamic interplay, the commingling of senses, the crosstalk that defines not only the synesthetic, but all experience. Sensing, then, is not merely a passive receipt of the world. It is a dialogue, a feedback loop that edges us into being. It is the first utterance in a conversation between self and other, between body and world. The echo of our presence, flung outward and distorted as it returns, is a primal knowing, a knowledge that speaks before words. These echoes shape our way of being, threading through the metaphors and textures of how we come to understand ourselves and our world. I'll just put that back on. Transness as an embodied practice, as a type of sensing technology, makes this echo audible. The project of transness is many things to many people. For me, transness, like sound, is more of a methodology of being in the world rather than a fixed position or form, readying itself to be perceived. As an artist who is trans and who also works with sound, I have come to develop an intimate material relationship to these two methods of being that feel extremely connected to the queer project more generally, and a paradigm shift in cultural consciousness. In 2015, for Avant, I wrote that about the relationship between visual dominance and queer sound. Quote, I find that in a visually dominated world, we are conditioned to flattening of information through quick optical interpretation of difference. A more complex understanding of subjecthood can come from the auditory, and this is why I typically work with sound. I'm less interested in what a queer subject appears to be than what it does and what is done to it, what shapes it and what it shapes, and more specifically, where it asserts its autonomy and power in a world that is intent on its categorical silence. I want to posit that transness is not residing in how we are perceived, but is actually a methodology of perception itself. A felt or vibratory experience of transness is one that requires a space of interiority that is actively in creative conflict with the external. And this place of rupture, this membrane, is also a source of profound insight, resilience, power, and creativity. So that's some of the intro to the essay. And I go into that more, but it'll be out soon, maybe soon, not sure. For this presentation, I will attempt to show you in an abbreviated way my path towards these ideas, with an emphasis on what I've been working on recently. I will be showing images and video and playing audio. And as many of you know, that when working with temporal or performative mediums, good documentation is sometimes elusive. But so I will ask for your imagination in these works I will show you. So the first piece, oh, it's just speeding it up. Interesting. Let's see. It's like, how do I go to the next slide? That's a real question. Let's just go like that. And then we'll do that. Okay, so this first piece is a collaboration between me and Micah Silver, and this was from 2022 at the Hammer Museum in LA. And so you have these two beings, energy character Micah on the left and energy character Jules on the left, or on the right, and this screen in the middle is called Power Visuals, parentheses, deletion. And so they are these two instruments, basically, and they were blind contour line drawings of each other's faces. And then inside each sculpture is heat, these like heat lights, lamps. There's air moving through the tubes and sound coming out the little holes in the tubes as well, in the hoses. So basically, they're both these instruments that can be played, and being played meaning you can adjust the heat, the air, and the sound emanating from them. And then in the background, you see this this is a Schlieren imaging system. And what it does is it's using these like a digital interface to display the energy that's moving between them. And it's funny, so I'll read you some of the text, but so this is this is like an example of that as a visual representation. It's like it's a computational system that that uses a camera to be able to show the energy moving in the space. And these are some other images from the show. Yeah. So this work emerged from our shared desire to interrogate the inherent fallacy of precision in quantifiable data when compared to the messy sensory membranes of the body. Our bodies interpret energy transfer, heat, sound, movement, not as discrete measurable phenomena, but as complex felt experiences. What we desire most in art, people, and objects remain invisible. The visible serves as a graspable interface, an acculturated entry point into meaning, but desire itself, its momentum and its realness is always beyond visibility. To work with invisible forms of energy as social material is fundamentally the practice of music. Composers and producers often move beyond the frameworks of design and production to map out ways of listening, tracing intentional forms that bridge inner worlds and external experiences. Similarly, engaging with air, heat, or smell is not simply an exercise in foregrounding what is marginally perceptible. It does not seek to center the overlooked, but rather to embrace the unknowability we encounter when we are full of desire. This artwork explores the commodification of our senses and our reliance on the visual as a dominant framework for making meaning, a framework often rooted in the quantitative, analytic, and causal paradigms. Yet instead of adhering to such paradigms, it constructs a diagram of the unclear, a systemic anti-correlational form that resists the desire for surface-level clarity or causal logic. It embraces synesthetic knowing, the interplay of sensory modalities, and the uncertainties we face when navigating what we cannot fully grasp. Central to this exploration is the dynamic between the physical sensation and the empirical visualizations. The viewer feels the heat and sound emanating from the reflectors, contrasting this immediate tactile experience with the reading of the Schlieren visualization. This tension invites a re-engagement with the body's sensory system in the context of empirical knowledge. It reveals a space, a gap between the sensory trust and analytical certainty, a space where the body in itself becomes a site of perception and an object of inquiry. So you walk through these, and they, so as the viewer goes through them, you can perceive all this different type of energy transfer that's happening in the air and on your body, on your skin. Moreover, the energy characters in the work function as a kind of aura burner or scanner. The viewer-feeler moves through them, encountering the interplay of heat and sound as a material and metaphysical presence. And this interaction challenges the viewer to confront the unseen forces that shape their perception and invites them to inhabit the gap between physical sensation and intellectual comprehension. So I don't have video of this, actually. I just have this one. And I do hope that they get to be performed again, because it was only like that one performance of them. But this next show was Trinities, which was a solo show at the Cohen Gallery at Brown University in 2021. I'm just going to see if I can do a larger image here. Maybe not. So the framing of this was during the pandemic, and so there was these 3 sculptures on the ground. They're called Interpenetration 1, 2, and 3, and then there was this holographic wall piece and the snapping of fingers back and forth. So there was a transducer on one wall and transducer on another, and there was this phasing happening between the snaps, so they got closer together or further apart. So the whole show is called Trinities, but this piece, the snapping, is called Human Time, and then the 3 sculptures are called Interpenetration 1, 2, and 3. So let me play you a little bit of it, and then we can hear this description. Okay, so Trinities explores the measurement of tempo as a way to interrogate the trappings of quantitative systems and their effects on our understanding of self, time, and the natural world. Tempo is determined by the distance between the first and second beat. A short distance becomes fast or allegro, a long distance becomes slow or legato. Beyond a certain scale, years, or century, this pulse becomes imperceivable to humans. Yet it might still exist as the tempo of rocks, a kind of time inaccessible to us. Humans are entrained by tempos that define progress, history, and identity, often unconsciously. These rhythms dominate our lives, but stepping outside of them reveals their power, how they shape beliefs and limit perception. Tempo's binary nature, marked by 2 beats, organizes the human world, 2 snaps to dance, to sing, to work. Yet the experience of being trans opens a third space, one outside of dominant binary, where a new rhythm can emerge. And what happens when a third node disrupts the distance between 2 beats? A third pulse creates a distortion, bending tempo and revealing the possibility of singing and existing outside of human times. Trinities invites viewers to consider a trans-sensing, a way of navigating the world that unmoors the subject from the dominant tempos, offering an interpenetrative concept of selfhood, a trinity that moves beyond the echo of binary rhythms. Asking us to imagine tempos beyond our perceptions, tempos that embrace the unknowable, and a selfhood that sings beyond the constraints of time and measurement. This is one of the interpenetrative sculptures. I'm just gonna keep going. Traps and transmutations. This is like the 3rd time I installed this piece, and it changed every time. And it actually came from, I don't think I'm gonna have time to show you, but my background is in performance and composition, but I worked with dancers for a while and developed like a composition choreographic language that then this piece in like 2015 maybe, not this version, this was 2021, but Traps and Transmutations 1 was like the first time I kind of took what I was developing in the theatrical or kind of performative context and distill it into a sculptural form. So this resonating stage was something that I had kind of basically worked through with performers on an actual stage, and then develop this condensed model. So Traps and Transmutations 3 is a resonating stage composed through a cosmology of vibrating actants and actors. The traps come in the appearance of static forms, recording mechanisms, and quantifiable technologies. The transmutations are catalyzed by all the forces pushing away from cutting, degrading, and liberating these forms. Sound is a form of energy transfer, literally pushing through the forms: knives, cast soap, microphones cast in resin, and desiccated cabbage. These forms are cast in a vibratory ecstasy through a composition of audio, including my breath blowing up a balloon, the recording of the motor of a fan, and a series of feedback exercises with the stage. The most explicit symbol of the body, a 5-foot resonating glass vessel filled with salt water and other organic detritus, is animated by my voice, chanting the phrase concave, convex as a sort of transubstantiary ritual. At which point is a vibrating sack of molecules legible as an object? What makes it so, and what are the forces that act upon it to assist or degrade this legibility? Is the convex curve of a hip enough to signify a gender? At what point does a curve become a symbol? Can we chart the precise moment of categorization? What are the possibilities if we can't? And this was also, I was using, and still do, ice and water in my work. These were these T-shirts that are in the next piece I'll show you, that were changed out every day, basically, by the gallery assistants. And they were frozen in water, and that water was dripping and degrading some of the forms on the stage. You can see it here. This next piece is called Trans as Indicator Species. It was at Klaus Gallery in winter 2020. An indicator species is an organism through its particular set of sensitivities, measures disturbances in ecosystems. Studying the proliferation, reduction, mutation, or adaptation of these organisms helps to assess the general health of the system and the symbiotic relationships thus within. Measuring these individuals can indicate a change in the balance normally maintained within an ecosystem and often points to larger shifts in surrounding forces. When trans people reject the external imperative of a birth sex and undergo biological, spiritual, and social transformations, our bodies are the site of interdependent ecological upheaval. We are physically transforming our internal biologies while simultaneously pointing to and changing the social, political, and often familial structures through which these bodies were shaped. Trans people, as well as people inhabiting other bodies which are stamped by social, political, and economic systems, are often the first to be harmed by the chemistry of the normative force fields and also those whose very existence signals another potential stew. The biome of the internal becomes the biome of the external, and the skin, or the membrane through which this transformation occurs, is the most dynamic place for energy transfers, sound, heat, politics, debate, and catharsis. Through the skin, we communicate our internal biome as sweat, as breath, as our inner molecules become atmosphere. The smallest, most intimate parts of ourselves, hormones, pheromones, bacteria, chemicals, diffuse through our skin and commingle with the outside air. Like a virus, we spread ourselves, our beliefs, our chemistries, evaporating into the weather of our social systems. In this piece, Trans as Indicator Species, I am creating an evaporating resonating system with a large sheet of copper skin. Including in the system is a projection of video of microscopic images of hormones, vitamins, and foods ingested, overlaid with the image of my belly's sweaty t-shirts of friends who identify with the word trans, encased in ice melting onto the metal sheet, infrared lights causing the evaporation of the sweat inside the gallery, and stereo transduction resonating copper sheet with an audio of a heartbeat. So let's see if we can see some of these things that I was eating. So we can get to the good parts. I think this was a salt crystal, actually. This is called The Whole is Also a Whole, WHH. In 2019, I developed a new commission for the Walker Art Center. For this resulting installation, I wanted to expand on sculptural forms of my work by engaging more with physical conditions of stages or structures on which the vessels resided, and also when dealing more explicitly with language as an orienting structure of identity. Thinking through the idea of a transgender hybrid chimera multiple, I created a piece that utilized a reduced set of sonic variables, my voice saying one specific phrase with the only affecting variable of pitch or frequency. I then played my voice through these 16 different channels of the vessels that are filled with all this different types of salt water and other kind of decaying or rust that had been developing in my studio, or other kinds of rot or things going through transition that have been like kind of left in the vessels for a while, actually. It's composed of organic matter filled glass vessels, charged and broken by sound, two-way mirrors, and an interlocking piano-esque chamber. My voice is heard coming through each vessel in a variety of resonating pitches, thus creating a chorus from the singular. According to theorist Brandon LaBelle, quote, the whole is also a whole. The whole individual is emptied out by the very thing that completes it. That is to say, language brings one into consciousness while deflating individuality by forcing it into its network, by making the song of myself accountable on the pages of a social text. I'll play you a little bit from this.
Blah, blah, blah. 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 Blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah.
I'm just gonna keep moving here, but yeah. So when I moved from LA to New York, I applied for the Sculpture Center in practice, and I got accepted. It's an amazing thing. You should all apply. That was like a big thing for me in my work. This was 2018, and I made this work called Dysmorphias Draw a Line. I wanted to exponentially increase the dynamic potential working between materials by increasing the size and shape of the ensemble. I've been working with these glass vessels for a while, and I wanted to create a piece that was simultaneously an instrument ensemble installation that was played by the perceiver walking through the long tunnel of Sculpture Center's site-specific basement. And I arranged translucent bisected reflective liquid and tropic material into an ensemble of glass vessels filled with salt water and detritus, rotting grapefruits, a rusting screw, and mold placed in a line, acting as both instruments and speakers. I recorded intimate dynamics between the resonant glass vessels. I was allowed to install there for like a month before it was during the holidays. And so I recorded the feedback as it nears the surface of the glass, the sound of water being poured into their interior, as well as my own body, a mic dragged along the hair of a leg, an emanation of voice from inside the mouth, a hum or hiss. At times, I voiced the word bad, drawn out and stretched like the sound of a sheep, disarming the word from its decisive snap judgment quality. It's an assertion of either this or that. Each object is studied with a transducer that converts the audio into sound, and so I was able to work through two distinct structural constraints as compositionally. There was the recording relationship between myself and a specific vessel that I characterized as a fetish recording, where one vessel would play that specific audio, and that was in opposition to a second compositional system in which I took one of the recordings and played it in succession through the glass vessels, and these two compositional structures resulted in a 13-minute performance that the audience would walk through. And one of the vessels actually broke when I was doing the feedback recordings, and I got to record that, so that's part of that glass breaking is part of this piece, which I love, and I was able to capture that moment. Interesting. I didn't want to play anymore. Okay. Show that. Okay, I just have a little bit of time left, so just briefly I'm going to show you guys that performance I talked about that led to some of these. This was let's see, Rooms, Junk, and Other Forces. This was like in 2015, and this was an opportunity I had to work in a black box theater as a composer and a choreographer to develop go through some of the questions I was working through. There were 6 different parts to the performance. One was a call and response, speaking through a screen. I'll play a little bit of that. These thing duets. Number 3 was playing the space. 4, vector dance, mapping the space. 5, junk plays itself. And 6 is the big meta kind of compositional structure for the whole show was everything that was heard and activated during the first half was then played back in live. I was live mixing it in the second half. Oh, do I not have a video here? Oh, man. Oh, I'll have to just imagine that. It's on my site. But, yeah, so the whole second half was in complete darkness, and so everything that was activated and recorded in these different kind of systemic kind of ways were then played back, and I live mixed that. So the audience could, like, kind of re-remember all this stuff that had happened before. And that was, like, the measure of how they kind of perceived and understood what was what had happened. Yeah, I have 2 minutes left. I think I might stop there. There's more, but sometimes it's just better to just stop and we can do questions. So that's it. It's an edited performance, yeah. It's like a 5-minute edit of that performance. It was like a 30-minute or like 40 minutes yeah.
Hey, Jules.
Hi.
Thanks so much for coming to talk to us.
Yeah.
I'm really curious. Is this happening at all? No. Yeah? Oh.
It's delicate.
Very delicate. So what I was interested in is you have, when you're just talking about the 13-minute piece in the sculpture center, and the amount of liquid in the vessels obviously impacts the sound that they make. How do you deal with the evaporation of the liquid?
Oh, yeah,
over
for that
time?
piece I used to have to pour, what I did, actually I'm remembering, that was a while ago. I would draw these little Sharpie lines on the vessels and then people would have to come through and refill them. I make people work. It's yeah, it sucks, but yeah. And it actually wasn't as much for the sound. Yes, it does change the sound and those overtones that are so exciting. But more than that, the water wouldn't vibrate. The cymatic, the visual, like the because it wouldn't resonate at that certain frequency, and therefore that dynamic thing that you would see wouldn't happen. It'd be it looked like dead a little bit.
So they actually deactivate if they're not at a specific...
Yeah, that is true. Yeah,
That's
that was
really
my timer. Yes.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
I kind of had a similar question to Erin, so it's a perfect follow-up.
Okay.
And I was curious about the relationship in your work to maintenance
Yeah.
and decay. And you talked about how they all have to be maintained, but I don't think you addressed that in the lecture part. And I was interested if there's more than like a utilitarian, like this has to be maintained idea to that.
Like why? Well, I mean, yeah, we had talked about this in some of the studio visits, like this idea of like my background is in music, really, so I'm just not really satisfied with a static object. And so like these different scales or tempos for change becoming audible or visible or kind of like, or, you know, are interesting to me. Like, and I think some of the students here are also like asking those kinds of questions. Like, so, you know, the piece at Bortolami, which is like this very fancy gallery, you know, I walked in one day and there was something really weird happening in, what do I have? In the crater thing with that I had the piece of oh my God, lettuce, not lettuce, cabbage. I had cabbage in there. And, there was something moving in there. And I was like, oh my God, what is that? Evan, the director, and I was like, I'm like, I don't know. And it turned out it was really gross. It was a thing that you could imagine happening. And you guys aren't imagining. It was maggots. And that's something you don't, the gallery doesn't really, but we worked it out. We took them out. They got, yeah. So, yeah, there has to be a bit of maintenance. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like a dynamic problem. It's like a problem that I make problems. Like, so the ones in the hammer piece, it was actually really sad. They turned them down because they were disrupting the heating system in that room. I'm like, well, why did you put them in that room next to the thermostat? You knew these were heat. So they just make problems. I don't know, and sometimes that's interesting, and sometimes it's just like not, and it's kind of just annoying that they have to be turned off or whatever. But yeah.
I had one other question, if nobody else has a question, but I can wait. I was just curious how you think about or make decisions about pieces where there's a recording versus pieces where you are performing there.
So all the pieces I showed were recorded, like they were played back pieces. Sometimes I do performances where I like activate the work through a live element, but the ones I showed you were all recorded. But they were like that last one was a dynamic recording system, like in that actual space. So I spent a lot of time in there, like cultivating those resonances and what I was playing back. So, it wasn't just like something. This is also a thing that happens where like I build the whole system and then I have to like play it, and it takes a long time to develop like what the piece is. And if I don't have that time, then I'm just kind of like winging it at the end there, bring it all together, building the stage and then like all the things and then having to like activate it. And, so I have to have time to rehearse in these systems that I make.
Hi.
Hey.
I was thinking a bit about the idea of sensing, and I feel like you've been talking about it largely on either like a sonic acoustic level or like a vibratory like physical level. But I was curious, as like another end of sensing, what sort of aesthesis does and like the aesthetic quality of your work. I feel like you have very kind of clean, very determinate aesthetics, and I don't think that in the talk you were really discussing as much how you come to the visual aspects of the work, but I was curious what role the visual plays not only within how you conceive of your work as objects outside of just like sound or experience, but also how the visual is performing also conceptually within the work.
Yeah, so originally when I was kind of doing these experiments in the studio at Cal Arts, I think I was still doing performance, but I was working with like very with materials that I could manipulate with sound. So like metal sheets or like these glass objects, and there would be some kind of dynamic experience that would the audio and the sound, the sonic was really important in dictating what I was using actually, and then there is this like relationship to material through, I would say, like a science aesthetic, or like an aesthetic that like kind of like looks towards either two things, either like the lab or like scientific instruments, but then also the stage and like performativity through like these these scaffolding that I use a lot, or like so thinking through the aesthetics of performance, of staging, but also like experiments and setting up like systems of relationships. And I like certain colors. And I like color.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There you go. Oh, wait, but there's another question. Oh, first, I'll go over that.
Thanks so much for your talk.
You're welcome.
So there is like an aesthetic, I think that you were talking about, like you're using the language of science. You have these like beakers. You're using these materials that are decaying. And I wondered, you know, I see this attempt to create this physical embodied experience that the viewer can participate in. And it's like when you talk about trans-sensing, I think a lot about like, what is this embodied experience? And it feels like there's some ritual elements and like these become altars in some way. And I wondered if you see your work having any kind of like a spiritual message or an attempt to communicate in that way to the viewer.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that, trans-sensing can also be a type of intuition and intuitive space that I feel very much I have cultivated through my trans experience, but I think all of us can cultivate probably a little bit more of in terms of being aware of each other and the world and like kind of digging into and actually being interested in these things that we don't really talk about explicitly, like spirituality or an intuitive sense or being with things that aren't easily perceivable. That's definitely part of the work, and in all the ways that you can imagine that being. So yes, there's like a spiritual force to the work. I feel that. I mean, I'm interested in that, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Also, thank you for your talk. This has been like really, really inspiring and exciting to me. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how specifically you decide what sounds to accompany your sculptures. Because I was noticing in the videos, a lot of them have this really ethereal, haunting quality with a lot of repetition. And I was just wondering if you could talk about the decision-making behind some of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like the edits that I show you guys are like very specific and, yeah, it's interesting. So I have two feelings about this. One is that all audio is the same and nothing is important. It's just about the energy moving through the systems, and that nothing, it's like that as a material, like its source really kind of doesn't have like significance in terms of a material. But my other conflicting feeling about this is that it actually does, and I kind of go back and forth about it, like that, like a material that, like of the balloon being blown up, like that's a very specific embodied like sound that I use. It's like a fetish recording. Like I use that recording. There's also the recording of this piss pot recording I did where it's like pissing into a metal pot that I freaking love. Like these certain recordings I just like love, and I just want people to listen to. And like I actually did a lecture once where I just like had students just listen to like all these my favorite recordings. And it's like, what is it about those? Okay, so there's some embodied practices around like how I got those recordings, how I like and how I engage with them, but also they're just like a sonic quality that's super engaging, right? And that's like the musicality of it. So music doesn't have to mean anything, right? Music doesn't come from like a way of like understanding and knowing that is about like someone, we're talking about acousmatic sound, like, so it doesn't have to do this like correlative kind of meaning making, but at the same time, sometimes I do edge into the materials list with audio as well. And that like, sometimes I go back and forth about it being important.
Got it. So for you, it's more of an atmospheric quality, this kind of thing that pervades the space?
I wouldn't call it atmospheric or, God forbid, the soundscape, but I would say that it's the like where the source is coming from, like that as a material is sometimes less important than than people might want to make it be, right? That like at the end of the day, it is just audio is sound, and so what it's doing, what it means, it can mean different things. Like it can be different things at different moments. And once it's activated, and every time you listen to it in this way that I'm kind of presenting it compositionally is different. So it takes on the different qualities of the space, of the vessels that it's played through, or whatever material it's played through. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, is there?
Thank you for the talk. It has been beautiful.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to ask you this question that the body is highly privatized, and at the same time is very like we are competing like political domains, you know? Like
Wait, say everything you just said again. The body is what?
Body is like you know how it's highly. Maybe this is not. Let me just ask the question.
Okay.
I think because like you showed the studio work first, and during the video talk, and then your body was present, right? And then creating the sound.
Oh yeah, the little experiment thing I showed. Yeah.
And then in the performance, your body is present, creating the sound as well. And then I was wondering, is your body's presence like how your subjecthood is recreated, or like in any sense is different from your does your body presence like make a difference in your work in the sense of creating the subjecthood, or do you even, is it relevant or is it not relevant? I'm just wondering.
My body, say the one thing, say it again, say the question again.
So your body presence, like
Yeah.
some of the work is present,
Yeah.
and then some of the work it isn't, right? So I was wondering whether that doesn't make it like a difference, or like, do you think about it, or is it relevant to you?
Well, I think of them all as like some kind of body, you know, they're like kind of all either instruments, part of a compositional whole, and those instruments are a type of embodiment, you know, and so a type of body, whether it's like my body, someone else's body, like, you know, the materials, there's different types of ways that I like use myself and others to like represent these kinds of forms, but I do think of them as bodies a lot of the time, or like, or sensing membranes, or like something that akin to a body, or something. I mean, this term body gets real messy, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut in, but I just feel like I'm not sure if you understood the question. Like,
Oh, okay.
About-
Explain it to me.
I'm not going to explain because I don't know for sure, but just to emphasize, like,
Yeah.
your own presence, your physical presence in the presentation of the work, is that relevant for you, whether you're there or not?
Like if I'm there as a performer or not. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like, you know, you start with your body because that's what you got. You're like working with your body. Yeah, it feels very like all is there always. And then also it's not there. You know, it's all like a simulacrum kind of place of beingness. So I don't know if that answers it better, but I appreciate you trying to clarify that.
After 7, I think we need to do it.
Okay.
I can ask you on my own.
Okay. Thank you.